Started. I'm sure we'll have friends joining throughout. First session of the day. I don't know how many people were out there boogieing on the dance floor last night. So some sore feet. I've been very excited for this discussion. I think many of us, when we see even just the term artificial intelligence, it conjures up different things. For some curiosity, for some fear, actually. So we'll talk about that. You know, this session actually came out of really a discussion with Jeff. And how many of you had a chance to be in Jeff's session yesterday, the demonstration? Okay, so just one of you. All right, so we'll give a little bit of context around that. So the idea here was that on day one of the conference, Jeff's session, and really it was a demonstration of what some of the current AI tools, how they can be utilized in counseling. And this discussion was really intended to now broaden and have an actual discussion around some of the, what's happening, how we're feeling, what are the ethical situations that we're encountering. How are we approaching policymaking in our schools and universities? And, we still don't have answers to a lot of these questions. So, I just want to set the context here that, and when I was building this panel, and some of you may have seen a post I made back in March, basically saying, pleading, who knows something about this stuff? Reach out to me. I want to learn. And at that time, I felt I was a little bit behind the eight ball. I think I woke up to ChatGPT back in March. I was hearing about it, but I was a bit ignorant. I wasn't paying attention to what was happening, and it just hit me. I started playing around with just ChatGPT, and I will say I was excited, but I was also a little freaked out. So I need to dig into this. So somehow, I can't remember who, but said, you need to speak to this guy, Jeff, in Brazil. So Jeff was very gracious, and we had a conversation. And, there are very few experts in AI in the counseling space. And I don't know if I'll let Jeff, say if he would call himself an expert, but probably as close as, as I've found in this area. And in fact, a lot of the conversations that we've had with university colleagues and school colleagues to say, yes, I have interest, but I don't feel confident enough to speak about it. So here we are. I am not an expert in this area, but I have intense curiosity. I know this is something that's going to be it's impacting our lives already. It's impacting the field and will in very intense ways. Krisha Shok's plenary yesterday, obviously there were elements of artificial intelligence there. And all of these things. So that's just for dramatic effect. That was planned. So what I will say just a few ground rules for this session. Katie and Scott, myself and Jeff, again, this isn't necessarily a solutions conversation. This is really a discussion. We don't intend for the panelists to be put on the spot. What are you doing about this? How are you handling this? And really being, having all of the answers, but really we want to elicit some of those questions and also create a forum where we can be transparent about some of these discussions. So welcome. It really is an incredible time to be in college admissions and in counseling, and in large part because of this. So let me just do some quick introductions. So Dr. Jeffrey Neill leads the counseling effort at Graded, the American School in São Paulo in Brazil. If I'm correct, Jeff is the first delegate ever to be physically present at IC3 from Brazil. So we're honored to have Jeff here. We also have Katie Van Wyck, who leads the international admissions and recruitment effort at the University of Arizona, and Scott Dyer at Boston University. We have incredible experience on the panel, but we also have incredible experience in the room. So we're going to really push you, we hope, to ask questions, to we've been, saying, okay, let's try to make this a little provocative. Let's push the boundaries a little bit and see where we land. So I'm gonna again just take a few minutes to set some context. We have a small demonstration, and then we'll really open this up for questions. Does anyone know who this? Mark might actually. Does anyone know who this is? You have a Marty? Does anyone else know? You get extra points if you know Marty. Mark, do you know Marty? Okay. Mark's from Drexel in the Mid-Atlantic region. I don't know how far. Do you have Giant in Boston?
No, I never knew the name, but
okay.
It follows me around the grocery store, it seems, whenever I'm there.
Yeah, so this is a little bit of comic relief, actually. But, there was something here. So this is a photo of me with Marty. Marty's a robot that roams around our grocery store. And I wouldn't say this is AI. Maybe going around and seeing, okay, is there a spill? I didn't speak with the manager about what actual functions Marty has, but my assumption is that maybe there's some anti-theft, pieces that are happening here. But, to me, this illustrates some of the humanity and technology conversation. And, even, how do we as humans connect to this evolution of artificial intelligence and how quickly this is evolving? And I think if we're talking about fear and what we feel, a lot of it comes from the idea that we're losing some humanity by this technology coming and, oh my gosh, what are we going to lose, as opposed to what could we possibly gain? So Marty is here. And, I've had my kids know Marty. They say, let's go to Giant because I want to see Marty. They're connecting with, we actually have a stuffed animal, Marty, at home. So where could this be? Where will we be in 5 years and 50 years and 1,000 years as human beings? Marty may just do my shopping and fly over. I don't know what's going to happen there. So there was a report that came out back in March, and most of you probably didn't read this report, but you undoubtedly saw some headlines about this report. Did anyone actually read this report? Yeah, okay. It was hard to find the actual report, but what was not hard to find were headlines like this. And if you look at every one of these headlines, and I remember, I was on my way to Wisconsin. There was a regional forum there, and I was on the plane. I was flying from Philadelphia through Chicago, and I was reading it. I was like, what's happening here? Are we going to lose? Is this coming to fruition? But if you look at the headlines, what do you feel? What do you see? Right? It's, oh my gosh, it's fear. And, at some level that's part of the, the media enterprise and, all of those kinds of things. But, what really struck me, I said, I want to read this report. I need to read this report. How can I find this report? And it took me a little while to actually find the report. Most of the articles did not actually, they referenced the report, but I couldn't find it. So I finally got my hands on it. And as I read it, I was actually shocked and a little, I would say I was upset, actually, because when I read this report, I saw it in a completely different way. Now, I'm not going to read these, but you can read these and see that. And just right in the front of the report. And yes, the risk of, okay, we are at risk of potentially, 300 million jobs and displacement and, all of this. But what you see here is the potential for massive growth, the potential for massive opportunity economically, globally, for jobs. And yes, people will be affected. I think where we are now is that this is advancing at such a rate that for some sectors and industries and individuals, it may be hard to keep up. I feel that. I think many of us feel that. But the point here is that there is a flip side to the coin, and it needs to be balanced. So as you see this, I would encourage you, and we'll share resources. You can read these reports. You can understand, actually, and nobody really knows, what will happen here. So here we are. We're going to transition to this discussion of artificial intelligence in counseling, in university admission, and we're all navigating in a big gray area. We had lots of discussion. I remember as a panel, and we said, okay, I was very curious. I was really probing with Katie and, what's happening, Scott at BU, and what's happening in Arizona and all of this. And again, it was a discussion. We really are navigating in the gray. But admissions offices, in some cases, are beginning to use AI even to read transcripts, to evaluate academic credentials. I think most institutions are not doing this, but at some level, it is beginning. There are conversations around what kind of bias are we embedding into systems like that. All of these discussions are really pertinent right now. Some of you may have seen that UCAS has put out a statement around something like the use of ChatGPT in the development of personal statements. Georgia Tech in particular they have an interesting blog, and there was a piece dedicated to that, and more or less in summarizing, we'll talk more about that. But UCAS and Georgia Tech and some others have said, your work needs to be your own, but this can be a companion. This can be a partner, as Jeff calls, AI. We can have AI be a partner in this for feedback, for other areas of exploration that could happen. So how can this be utilized by you as counselors and as university colleagues as well? And then, of course, the flip side of that is, there's all of those really scary things that we see. I think when we first saw ChatGPT, we say, well, the essay is dead, personal statement is dead, creativity is dead. I'm still hearing some of those things. There was a really interesting case in the US, and I saw this, it really caught my attention, that there was a lawyer in the United States who was actually citing in a case briefs and references for cases that did not exist. Right? So this stuff can happen. We're going to get into this. All right. We're going to get into all of this. So we have Jeff, I'm going to turn it over to you. We have a very brief demonstration. And for those of us joining, and also welcome to everyone that's joining us virtually as well. We have now, I think as we're waking up, the room is getting a little more full. How many of you were able to attend Jeff's session yesterday, just to give us a sense? Okay, so it's a little more, about half of the people in the room. If we can switch over to the other, Anupama, if we can switch over to the other PPT, guys, and play the video. Okay, just give us a moment. We'll have that going.
So while he's setting that up, I'll dive in and give a little context. So the session yesterday was mostly, as Jim alluded to, a how-to, maybe 7 different use cases for how we in the counseling admissions field might choose to use ChatGPT in particular. We stopped short of looking at the ways in which students would use it. But just for the purpose of this demonstration, we tried to choose what might arguably be the most, I say, controversial of the 6 or 7 that I showed yesterday, which was the using ChatGPT to generate a counseling reference, a counselor letter of recommendation. And so I'll just continue talking while they're setting this up. But they, I've been doing a lot of presentations on artificial intelligence in this space, and one of the things that became abundantly clear, as Jim also referenced, is the amount of fear. Initially, I think January, February, maybe into March, a lot of the fear that I was encountering was from counselors and admissions folks who were anxious and maybe even, in a very typical way that is common for educators, to shut down and sort of deny the utility of the tool out of fear that it's something that a student could misuse. Fearing that, they could use this to write their essays. So therefore it must be bad. Let's just not use it. Let's ban it. And then I think one of the entry points past that was, I think, for a lot of counselors to see that there's great utility outside in their own work, outside of just the essay. So then, I think it kind of generates a little bit of excitement from counselors in particular, to hear that there's ways that they can, do their job more efficiently, more effectively. And then I think that the second fear that came up was that this is going to replace me. And I shared yesterday, I don't share that. I don't harbor that concern. There will always be space for counseling professionals to connect one-on-one. But just to speak to that point, there's a lot of ways in which you could use this tool to spend more time with kids. This particular use case that we're going to show is one that probably saves me, and I'm in a very privileged position where I only have about 37 counselees. It saves me about 90 minutes per letter when I write. And then I think the choice therefore is how do I want to choose to use that time that I've recouped? And my choice is therefore to put it back one-on-one situation with kids. And there's a great irony in our profession that we take time out of our busy days to sit in a room by ourselves to write letters about kids who are somewhere else at the time needing our guidance to write these elaborate letters as part of their applications when they really need us. They need us on the other side of the table. And we're like, no, go away. I need to write about you. Right. And so this is one of those ways where I think it can really move the needle. So.
All right. So there's an issue with the video. We're going to do this the old fashioned way. We're going to do this the human way.
Okay.
All right. And we'll see if we can get the video in play. But if we can, we have some handheld mics, right? There were many people here who were at the session yesterday, right? I would love just to open it up to our participants here and say, can you reflect a little bit on Jeff did the demonstration the entire, hour yesterday. Can someone speak on one of the things that really stood out to you? There were many aspects there, right? There's letters of recommendation, resumes. I know it's early in the morning, but is someone ready? Something really stood out. Yeah, we have a couple of people here in the front. Can you bring the mic? Yeah. Okay, test. Yes, please.
Hello, morning. Can you hear me? Yeah. So one thing I realized is that it's good to be a language teacher in order to get the key words to frame the right prompt. But even more than that, what I found out was that there's help to improve your prompts. And that the next step is to edit. So we only use it for the first draft. And then we take the brag sheet. So that was very helpful. That brag sheet tells us and makes what we want about the student very specific and focused in hours.
So the context here is part of what Jeff is doing is using artificial intelligence tools to actually take the student's own voice and help craft that letter of recommendation, right? So yes, please go ahead.
Yeah, good morning. I really like the data analysis and how we can do the SWOT analysis. So that was.
Can you give a little more background on what that actually entailed? From your perspective, what stood out to you? Right? Were there certain tools that were being used?
Like how we can upload the files and the ChatGPT will give us the data in a.
Okay, so we're seeing data analysis. We're actually seeing counselor letters. Yes, there's another colleague here. Yeah, thanks, Jaden. You can help.
I would say that ChatGPT enhances creativity because I was quite fascinated with the elaborate prompt that Jeff had created to be input into the AI to get the desired output. I think that's where our skill as counselors will come into play to give in the right kind of inputs. And that's what stood out for me in the session. And of course, the metrics, what she spoke about, that's also right now we're doing it manually on Excel. I think putting that on ChatGPT is pretty value adding. Thanks.
Okay, perfect. Jaden, you can hang on to the mic. We'll come back to the audience shortly. what I would love to do, and this is, I think actually works much better because we can spend most of this time now just getting into and chewing into the various topics that we have to discuss. I want to just hear if I can turn it to Katie and Scott. And Scott, I'll start with you. You're just next to us here. Broadly, where is AI fitting into the work that, and speaking with Anne, I know that there are a lot of discussions at BU around AI. But can you speak broadly about what kinds of discussions you're having, where AI figures into your procedures now, and where it might go?
I will certainly speak very broadly because I think that's all I'm qualified to really do. Because this is, again, this is, even though I work in academia, this is still a new evolution. And so I kid you not, within the last 24 hours, the Boston University admissions AI policy just landed on our admissions webpage because we had a summer work group that was really tasked with looking at a lot of different reports and articles and just sort of starting to think about how and what AI means to us and what it might mean to us and how we do our work. So I encourage you all to I mean, it's a very, very short, brief statement. But in a nutshell, it's something that we very much embrace. I mean, we are one of the largest, research institutions in the United States. And so embracing these new technologies is certainly something that we are moving forward with. From an admissions standpoint, how this will play out, if we have the same exact conference a year from now, it'd be fascinating to hear what Katie and I would say, what Jeff would say just a year from now. We're not utilizing any software at this point in terms of how an application is read or assessed or prepared for reading. It's still all very manually done. For us, the work still really has to be that of the student. And my personal, now don't confuse this with BU, this is a personal thing. I, much like that last comment we just heard, I think this really is a piece of software that can enhance a student's own development of their own statements, of their own arguments, of their own perspective. I personally, sitting in Jeff's presentation yesterday, I saw the value in this as a professional on a personal level, but also on a professional level. And so my excitement was shared with Jim's when he started to get to learn more about this. And I would hate to deprive our students of that same type of benefit because it's something, the more time you spend with it, I promise you, the more benefits you can see with the technology.
Katie? Thanks, Scott.
I'm just going to echo that. I also am speaking more personally in this as opposed to representing the University of Arizona specifically. We don't have a policy at the moment on how we utilize AI. Most of my work is actually in the marketing and recruitment end, a little bit less on actually reviewing and processing an admission application. And I think what's so surprising all the time is how much we're already utilizing this in all of our marketing efforts. So you all, perhaps have Netflix or you've been on Instagram and scrolling and it just knows exactly what you're looking for. It knows what shoes you looked at yesterday and which ones you want to buy today. And we utilize that when we're selling the institution because students put into Google or, into the internet exactly what type of school they're looking for, what program they're looking for. That information is captured. So when we say, okay, we are the University of Arizona, these are the things about us that are really special, it's going to present us to students who have already started to search for things that relate to what we offer. And I think that's so amazing in many ways because we are investing a lot of our marketing dollars in ensuring that we're presented to the right students and we're capturing prospective students that are a good fit for us. And so I just think it's really interesting, in the past you really created a beautiful image with a headline and information, and you put it out into the internet. And now all I have to do is tell Google a few headlines, a couple pictures, and a week later it tells me, well, these pictures aren't liked by students. They don't click on them. Give us some new ones, right? And I think that's a huge benefit to me in utilizing AI in order to make sure that the imagery we're using and taking on campus is also appealing to students and they want to come and study with us. So I use it quite often in marketing and a lot of the digital advertising that we already do. So yeah, I think that's just, it's all around us already. And so really embracing that to make sure that we're marketing ourselves in the best way possible. And then, yeah, that's kind of where we're at the moment.
Thank you, Katie. So you said that University of Arizona doesn't have a policy now. Scott, is there, and what about on the admission side? Katie, anything on that front in terms of how, using some of these tools, let's say in the application process? Is there a policy set as yet?
Not as of yet. I think it will come out of our graduate college first, but at the undergraduate level, actually a statement of purpose is optional. And so we have not come out with actually strict guidelines on students needing to write with or without AI tools. Okay.
And Scott, it'd be you. Policy from an admission standpoint, any policies published yet?
Just the announcement that was posted yesterday, just in terms of our general stance on the usage of AI. Aside from our admissions post yesterday, our computing and data sciences department about 5 or 6 months ago actually posted an AI policy about yay big on their website, which is specific to their department. So whether or not that's going to be a departmental thing across the board, I would imagine the university at some point will have its own umbrella policy, but it's in development.
Evolving. Okay. I know we have lots of our university colleagues in the room. Are there others that have put out, whether it's guidance or a policy on usage? Yes. Can we bring the mic, Jaden? Would you be able to speak about that just for a moment? You can introduce yourself as well.
Good morning, Anita from the School of the Art Institute of Chicago.
Wow.
So a little bit of an anomaly. This is amazing. We have published policy, our faculty have published policy to students on the usage of AI and DALL-E. We are asking and requesting our students to simply tell us if you've used any sort of AI technology. And we remind students that at the end of the Common App, they sign off on a statement that says everything that I have put into this application is, I'm honestly declaring, etc. So we remind students that you're beholden to your commitment of integrity when you place this application. So for us, it's both sides. It's on the admission side. We're very different, right? I'm reviewing portfolios. I'm reading all the applications and I'm looking at creative generations. So, and iterations. And so on my end and my staff's end, it's KPIs. We're looking at the key input variables the student is making. And it's a really, really fascinating way to be able to kind of analyze the critical thinking skills of a student by how they're using that tool and what they're generating as a result of that. So it's really fascinating, and it helps us really understand what the critical thinking skills are of the student and will they thrive in our environment. So
thank you, Anita,
for
for sharing.
A little bit different.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. Okay, and we'll do this. We want to hear from everyone here in the room about this topic. So I think, and Jeff, I think it was, excuse me, not Scott. I think it was the policy that, and really your students drafted that policy for the academic unit at your computing and information science, that there was even guidance around source citation, if you use ChatGPT or, I think some of the creative fields, some of the other tools like DALL-E and so on, how can we actually, from an academic integrity standpoint, make sure that that's reflected, right? That we're sharing that. So we're literally on the frontier of this. And I do think that institutions, especially now, I'm thinking from a US context, that the admissions process and cycle begins. And we know students are obviously using these tools. So we'll reset a little bit here. And, as I think, so there's been a very positive kind of viewpoint I think in so far in this discussion around this, but I think we can be honest and say that that is not, where everyone stands here. And especially as we say, I remember seeing Jeff's demonstration. I said, Jeff, I need to sit in on one of these things. Please, let me do that. And, I was there and I was blown away, and I will say at some level, I was amazed, but also I said, wow, this is really, pushing the boundary of utilizing technology and what I'm used to. I mean, I also come from a background of, starting admissions, reading applications and paper files, that evolved, all the way to where we are now. I want to open it up to see, are there others here in the room that, as you either saw Jeff's demonstration or you're utilizing these tools, what are some of the, the risks that you're seeing? I think we can have an open discussion about this as well. And yes, please. And we can bring the mic, Jaden, just to the front here. Actually, if we can begin here. Okay. And then we'll come to the back. Yes. Oh, wait for the mic. Yeah, the other way. Our colleagues. Thanks.
Hi, good morning. So the moment all this is discussed, we actually look into few months back and the few months ahead. And it's actually a very confused state. And the doubts that come in the mind, which we will, surely look at if any answers can be supplied, is what actually are we afraid of with AI? One is, if we look from a counselor side, all the essays want to know the child, like what all the child is involved in. And there are additionally like space for projecting all what he is engaged into. The only thing which I think we are working at is, or the children are using it as, is the language betterment or the vocabulary enhancement, because essays will also show what is done. That cannot be faked. So is it only about language? Are we afraid that the child will write something which he has not been doing? But again, the activities are already there. So what are we? Is it only the language issue that English will be beautified? All the essays will have grammatically correct and the beautified words. So what are we actually, scared of, that the children will be?
So you're framing
utilized?
a question.
Yeah, like I'm pondering.
Where do you stand on that question?
I feel like as my ethics, I will surely look at all what child has done, and that has to be projected. And we can also understand, you will also understand that it's like the AI has been used, we understand, but that's not fake. The child has done all those things. He has just used the good vocabulary and sentence structure to tell. And that can also be helped by another person, like some counselor or somebody who's helping. Here, he did not take the help of the counselor. He did himself and is showing. I could understand who writes on their own and who actually used AI. But the child has just used the, AI tool to frame that thing better. So what are we supposed to get scared of? Is it only language? Because somehow somebody is going to help the person or the child with that also. And the child is getting into those activities.
Great. So let's dig into this a little bit. Katie, go ahead. I think there's a couple of things happening.
Well, I
here.
just wanted to play devil's advocate for a second. So if a student utilizes ChatGPT to write their college admission essay, now they're admitted into the institution. If they're not capable of writing at the quality that they submitted, do they now need to utilize it for every class, for every essay, all the way until they graduate? Do they ever have the capacity to do it on their own? Is it something that they'll learn because ChatGPT maybe gives them vocabulary that they don't know, then they learn it and they're able to improve that way? I'm curious, at what point is it now a tool that they must always utilize in their life? I'm not sure. That's just something that I start to think about is, would they be able to continue on after education without utilizing that tool? Or is it now a component of who they are and how they do things in life? That's kind of it's a question I have too. I'm not saying it's one way or the other. I have no idea, but that's just my initial reaction.
This is good because we're really getting into it now. Go for it, Jeff.
Sure. So, one of the other great ironies of the college admissions essay in the United States is that form of writing that's being asked of kids is never asked of them typically throughout all of high school. and never is asked of them in university.
Never.
I have never heard of a student outside of a creative writing class, maybe a freshman seminar, being asked for a credit granting degree pursuing course to write a 650 word essay on a moment that transformed them. It's a legitimate question, but the point you make is a good one though. Even if suddenly with our magic wand, the essay for admissions suddenly became more analytical and less creative, to use those blunt terms, the question still persists. If they use it as a crutch through the application process, will they then therefore need to use it throughout all of their university? But then the next question I would ask is, when they graduate, it's still going to be a tool that they have available to them. So 42%, there's a study, and I can feel it. We're getting into it now. This is good. There's a study, just very, very quickly, that 42% of people who are using something like ChatGPT in the workplace actually are not admitting that they're using it. Right. So I'll just put that there. And yeah, there was someone in the back that had, do we have the mic? Yeah, please go ahead. And if you can also introduce yourself for the colleagues in the room.
Hi, I'm Kevin from the University of Miami. So
thanks, Kevin.
I've been following AI for some time. Some of the news articles that you referenced are familiar to me. And I think, and listening to professional, people in Google and so forth, interviews with them, it's important to note that AI is kind of in the dial-up phase of development, right? In the past 8 months that it's been around, it's really at the infantile stages of it. So everything that we've discussed, I think is very relevant, and how kids are utilizing it, especially what you just said about how people are not admitting that they're using it. But I think it's going to be interesting as it develops that, as more and more people adopt it and it's less foreign, it's just going to be kind of the course of change, right? At the beginning, people are nervous and apprehensive, and then once everyone sees everybody using this, it's there's going to be different rules and how we interact with this, right? And so I think how kids are using it right now is just where it is right now, but in I'd say even as early as 2 years, the landscape's going to be completely changed, because just by the rate of development, since, I said, in 8 months, ChatGPT has already have 2 improvements, and I hear I think version 5 is on the way pretty soon. So yeah. I don't think there's a real question here, but generally, I think it's important to note that part of it.
Thanks, Kevin. And it's actually daily. I think, in 2 years, who knows? I think when Jeff, you shared all of these resources, I now, I'm reading daily newsletters. Jeff has a weekly newsletter, specifically for this issue in counseling, all of that. Yeah. So let's keep going. There's let's go to Scott, and then we can come up here.
Yeah, I'm so sorry. I just wanted to add quickly to that point, because Kevin, as you were speaking, there's one sentence in that policy that we just posted yesterday. The Board of Admissions finds that the most compelling personal statements are representative of the writer's authentic voice, a nuance that generative AI tools have yet to achieve. This summer, my office did a series of sort of challenges, 2 different essays put in front of them. And about 75% of the time, a little higher on average, our office readers were able to determine one that was actually written by a human versus that. Now, a year from now, to your point, I don't know, maybe midway through this admission cycle, I don't know. But that's the coming challenge, most certainly, let's say.
Oh, thanks, Scott. Okay, yes, please. And if you could also introduce yourself and say which school you're from.
I'm Sonu Bakshi from a school, CMS, Lucknow. So from the point of view of a student, I have a wonderful body of students who really excel in academics and say are looking for being economists or being doctors or engineers or something like that. So all of that, those are not aspiring to be creative writers or authors. So maybe they are lax somewhere in the language, but they know their subject. So when they go to college, they're we might not get, they might not get admission due to the language skills or the creative skills during the writing of the essay. So, but then we are losing a good person to study and excel himself as a good economist just because he could not write an essay. So there, I believe AI is going to help them find that admission, because like if you're studying medicine, I don't know, you don't need fancy words to learn how to treat a person and being a good, like if, for example, if you're being a psychologist, you just need to have that warmth and compassion and the learning of the topics rather than having the fancy words in it. So there, I believe during the college applications, it might be a helpful tool. Of course, it can only be used when the college allows, obviously.
Yeah, and I think there are, I will say communication skills generally, this isn't a session about, skills necessarily needed for particular areas, but communication skills, I would say, are broadly important in every field. But that said, I think let's keep the discussion going. We'll add that before we hear. I think we'll come to Mrs. Shukla next, but just before that, I'll add that there are, and we can come to Namita as well. The reality is, if you're looking for some kind of uniformity in policy or practice, you'll probably be very frustrated for some time. And even in how institutions view something like, now this discussion so far has really revolved around an essay and personal statement. There are a lot of other elements to this. That will largely be dictated by how an institution, what do they use that statement of purpose for, and do they require it, and all of those kinds of things. So a lot of this will be institutional policy. And Mrs. Shukla, please. Yeah, I think it's on now.
I'm Sudarshana
Yes,
Shukla. I just had one question for especially universities here. AI is here to stay. ChatGPT is only going to get better with time. Are you rethinking how application can be written? Are you rethinking the components of the application, the essay? UCAS is already making a change from next year where they are being broken down. The personal statement is being broken down into specific questions. I was just wondering, are universities even thinking about making a change to the Common App or the prompts or the activity section or any components to help kids be a little more original?
Yeah, we can open that question up. We'll say that the common application, of course, is not dictated by the universities. That's a separate organization that has that. Some institutions, of course, have their own unique applications that they would. But your question is still very relevant in that. So either on the panel, Katie, Scott, or to our participants here. Universities. And again, yes, please go ahead, Anita.
Okay. So from our perspective, we use Common App, and then we shift to Slide Room it's an application for students to upload all their creative content. And we're adding in a statement there that says a declaration statement about the tools that you use to create your work. So you may say oils, pastels, ChatGPT, DALL-E, etc. So we're just adding that in as another component. And the other thing that I would say is that we're also taking some accountability and responsibility on the university side we have courses now on these topics, and we introduce these topics during the foundation year, the first year, so that students understand how they can use these tools as a method to, again, really improve their creative thinking skills, as well as be responsible for, it's all research, right? You're learning how to do research, and this is a tool to do research. You cite your sources in research and you cite your sources in the creative aspects of it. So I think that, it's a learning process, but we are teaching courses in it at the first year level about, here are the tools out there. Here's how to use them properly. Here's where you sort your sources, cite your sources.
Thank you, Anita. Any other institutions of higher education want to address that? Yes, sir.
Okay, this is Kirti from Grand Valley State University, Michigan, USA. So one of the things that we did at the grad level in terms of making a change on the application is there was some magic that happened in India, and all of a sudden we started seeing elevated GRE scores a couple of years ago. So the computer science department had decided to remove GRE as a requirement, and they added a video essay where the student had to speak and share their experiences on the video essay. So they could see the student, and they could also listen to the student and assess the communication ability, comprehension ability of the student. And that allowed the Department of Computer Science to pick more relevant students. And that was added onto the application. It was integrated, wherein the student had to click a link, and then a recording would start and end. And they had some practice questions before giving the actual attempt. They could practice it, and there was a random question that was asked. So this is one of the things that only one department did. It's not a change that happened across all departments at our school, but things like this, I think, wherein the student gets more involved, and it's not just test scores or written elements that can determine, that can give a more holistic approach to the evaluation.
Thank you, Kirti. Can we come to Namita?
Hi, good morning. Thank you, Katie, Scott, Jim, and Jeffrey for your discussion this morning. I think my question is more around, do you think high school students have the maturity to actually use these technologies? You spoke a lot about how, Katie, you've used it in marketing. It's an iterative process. You're figuring it out. I think, Jeff, I missed your demonstration yesterday, but we're all testing it. We're trying it out. When a child just puts something in ChatGPT and it spits it out, is it their work, or is it, you said something about having an authentic voice. If this technology has spit it out and they've written the prompt, does this define it as their voice, or does it define it as plagiarism? I think questions around that need to be discussed, because kids are kids, right? I mean, some of them are going to dig deep. They're going to come back to the question. They're going to try try things out on ChatGPT, while others are like, well, this sounds great. Let me just use what I have here. So how do we bridge that gap? And how do we really, how do we teach them to use this tool, but still stay authentic? I think, and that's for all of us. I mean, it's quite challenging.
I'm going to dodge your question and then hand off to them to maybe answer age-long questions of how we get students to be responsible. It's a good question. But one of the things that the session yesterday that we spent a little time talking about, but is really, I think, profound in my own thinking about this, is the evolution over time. And Jim made reference to this earlier. I try not to refer to ChatGPT as a tool. I try to think of it as a partner. All right. So when you start thinking of it as a partner rather than a tool, it opens up a whole world of possibilities in terms of what responsible use looks like, if that makes sense. We wouldn't necessarily, if you're, make it a human partner, you're not just going to take what your partner wrote and submit that. Those students do, right? But it opens up a whole series of questions about responsible and ethical use of the tool. But one of my bigger concerns is that's all well and good, but who's teaching the kids? Who's actually doing this work? All right. One of the resources that Jim didn't put up there is the IBO, International Baccalaureate Organization that oversees the IB diploma, came out very early, I think in February, and said, we fully embrace this as a tool that students should be using. And I think the language is wrong. I don't think they should be saying tool. I think that says the wrong thing to kids. But we have IB teachers at my school that forbid the use of it. And I feel like that's not right. I feel like that's not the right place to go. And, I also made reference yesterday that my job fundamentally as a college counselor is to make sure kids are prepared for college. If I find, the example I gave is, if I find out my kids are ill-equipped to find success in math in college, I'm not going to go teach them math personally as a college counselor. My job is then therefore to go work with administration, math department, to make sure our kids are well prepared. But where do I go when it comes to ChatGPT, when it comes to artificial intelligence, when it comes to this thing, when there's such resistance, particularly from some of the more ardent academics? You ask a good question and I don't have an answer for you.
Okay, so we've got about 5 minutes left, and I want to just a couple of things. There's no way to really wrap this conversation up, but we will. I think the idea here is that there needs to be more transparency and discussion about this. That's obvious. I think you can even feel how guarded we are when we're speaking about this. As schools, this is my personal opinion, not the position of my organization. And in some cases, there's actually, and Jeff, I don't know if you mentioned this. I'm also, deep in my notes over here that there are there are gag orders at some institutions around discussions of this area. So, yeah.
No, I mean, the reality is, and I made reference to this yesterday, my first presentation on artificial intelligence was on March 10th, and this is my 19th as we sit here to talk about this topic. And I've been begging, this is the first time I've sat on a panel with admissions representatives, right? And I was reaching out to friends and colleagues on the admissions side, trying to get people to come and talk. And many of them had gag orders by the universities not to talk about artificial intelligence. And I think at that point, and maybe I don't want to put you guys on the spot to talk about this, but what was complicating things at that point was the pending Supreme Court decision in the United States. And prior to that negative outcome, I think there were some universities that were telling me that they were talking about getting rid of the essay altogether and just doing away with it. And the reference to the man over there who said that there was a video essay that was being required. That's not uncommon. That's not unheard of in our field. And people were talking about that. I know I had a really interesting conversation with Duolingo about, can't you just tweak your software to have it be a video interview essay type thing? But yeah, it's this whole evolution. And I think in a strange way, those conversations about doing away with the essay were entirely quelled by the Supreme Court decision. So in a very weird way, I think the SCOTUS decision may have saved the essay at a lot of institutions, but a lot of really complicated intertwined things.
Okay, thank you, Jeff. And one other area that I just want to call attention to right now is is anyone using some AI detection tools either at their schools or at their institutions? There has been recent discussion about AI detection tools actually not working properly. And student work that is original is being flagged as artificial intelligence, and as the AI continues to advance. That just I think it's really important that we as educators are keeping up on this topic, and whatever the policies and practices that we have at our institutions, we need to build in some measure of flexibility and adaptability to that. So just sharing that, I've heard some stories, that have been pretty unfortunate, but, we may need to use some of these tools in admissions and also in schools. So there are a lot of resources. We'll share all of this. You'll have access to this. These are all hyperlinks. You can do that. I'm sure you can reach out to me personally. I can share it. We'll also make sure that this is in the IC3 Institute Resource Library. Many of the PPTs will be here. Universities don't necessarily have access to that, but we'll make sure that you do have access to this. There's some really good stuff here for you to go down the rabbit hole, so to speak. And it's deep. It's very deep. Just talk to Jeff or any one of us now. So what I'll say is recommendations, and we just have another minute or two for this. And I'll just share very quickly that in March, when it hit me that this is something that we need to be paying much more attention to in our team, in our efforts as IC3, we're training counselors. Where does this fit, right? Where does this fit? So what we immediately did was form a task force or a working group. This was defined. We said we're going to meet for, we laid out a specific time-bound period. And we identified there were 4 points of a vision for why we were doing this. And there were 3 very clear objectives. And we had a really team-wide, organization-wide discussion around this. And we had several meetings, but really the work was happening. And the 3 objectives that we identified were to develop and recommend best practices for our organization to use AI tools. Number two, to explore and vet some of the tools that are out there. And three, really to develop guidance for schools and universities through the IC3 Institute. So that work is happening and will continue to happen. So one of my recommendations is that if you're not having discussions about this at your school, you should be. And you should be doing this in a transparent way. If 42% of your people are already using these tools, your students and so on, probably more than that, and they're not telling you, what are we missing? All right, what are we missing and how can we really harness that? So in closing, I don't know if they're particularly, Jeff, if you have recommendations for counselors as to where they could begin, or not necessarily where they could begin, but just general broad recommendations that you might leave us with, and then we'll close this up.
Sure. I mean, Scott said it best at the beginning. What Scott said was, the more you play around with this tool, the more comfortable you become. And I think the first step is just to get online. I mean, it's free. The ChatGPT 3.5 is a free resource. So get on there and start playing around with it. I mean, the greater familiarity you have, the more comfortable you'll feel in talking and working with your students on it. But that's a very simple starting place, but it's not self-promotion, but I started a newsletter on a weekly basis to put out information, and on a regular basis, there's a new resource or a new free tool that different people can use to become more familiar with the different resources that are out there. So,
and if you want to hear Johnny Cash singing Barbie Girl, Jeff's newsletter has that as well. And a lot of these newsletters are broad, right? So they're in all industries, what are the developments and, all of these kinds of things. And there's a lot there. Jeff's is actually specific for counseling. So that may be really helpful. So with that, I just want to say, can we just give a round of applause to the panel? I think especially for, I want to just say thanks, especially to Katie and Scott, because again, we had a lot of these discussions, and I think it took some courage just to sit here and say, okay, let's have this discussion, right? And be here and do that. Obviously, huge thanks to Jeff. I think that was, he was the inspiration for me to get this going. And so thank you, Jeff, for that. And to all of you, let's keep the discussion going. I mean, this is something that has to continue to happen. It's evolving rapidly, very rapidly, and we can support each other in this. And I think having a forum to discuss this was really the purpose of this session. And then, keep an eye out for Marty. You may see Marty roaming around, not just your grocery store, but maybe your schools, and we'll see where that goes. But thank you very much. I will say there should be some evaluations that are coming out. We'd love to take your feedback on the session. So if we're circulating those or disseminating those now, just take a minute or two and give the feedback on the session, and we'll do that. But thank you all.